Hello and welcome to Discover with Sbenati. We are on episode number 12. Thank you for those who are watching us on YouTube, and thank you for those that are listening on the podcast, either on Apple Podcast or Spotify or wherever else you're consuming this podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Today we have a guest that I think the word special doesn't do him justice. He has done something that most people don't ever do in their entire life. And he's done it all for his son, Jesse, who is basically the central theme of his story. And he's written two books, one of which I have right now. It's called The Right Road, and this is basically about the journey with Jesse. And I highly recommend it. It is very inspirational. A lot of lessons to be learned from there. And here we are. John, good to have you on.
Thank you very much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Just tell the audience a little bit about you, about what you're doing now. We will go through how you got to where you are now, but just brief introduction as to what you're doing now.
Right. Well, I know we're going to backtrack through the story, so I'll just jump to where I'm at now. I work now as a professional speaker. And I love doing that. I love being with an audience and having a chance to share with them what it's possible to do when you really try. And everybody sometimes thinks that doing something is kind of reserved for a select group of people. It's not. Everyone, that door is open for everyone to go and do that thing you want to do and to try your best and push yourself to the limit and see what you can do. And more often than not, people surprise themselves. And way too often, we overestimate the other person's brain power and we way underestimate our own. We sell ourselves short far too often.
Yes, that's very true. So with this book, The Right Road, you ask a question on there, just on the cover. So when someone picks up the book, before they even read it, you ask the question, how far will you go? Now, that's a really intriguing question because a lot of people ask themselves that question, specifically when they're actually starting something, not really when they're at the point where they want to give up or not. That question doesn't really come up. So it's very, very, it's very timely in terms of when they pick it up, you ask the question, how far will you go? Now the question I want to pose to you. How far will you go in achieving whatever it is that you want to achieve?
Well, I have a goal in mind for my lifetime, and I think it's a reasonable goal. We fund research, and at the moment we started out without a dime, I should mention first off, and we are now, and have been for a few years, at the point where we give out more than $1 million a year to help fund research, and we're well on our way to being able to give out $2 million a year. And because I'm coming up on my mid-70s, I'm realistic enough to say, I'm not going to get a lot of things finished in life, so let's just pick the ones that we can really focus on. And my goal would be to see us reach a point where we could give out $5 million a year. And oftentimes, research is hampered by lack of funding. And I think that's true pretty much everywhere. So although I didn't know an awful lot about research, and we'll go into the area of research we're talking about here, I decided that what we needed was money more than anything else. And I had no idea how to do that. I'd never been a fundraiser in my life. And I just set out a plan and decided to stick with it. And I knew I was in this for the long haul. And then you just get out there and try your best. And that's all anybody can ever ask of you. So often people put themselves down and they think, oh, well, I was a failure at this. Well, no, you weren't. You learned something. And each time you pick yourself up and get back in the game, you learn a little more. So failure, in a way, is a good thing because you learn a lot. You learn a lot more when you fail than when you succeed, I think. But the trick is to just keep getting up and keep trying, and never give up. Mm-hmm. And you'd be surprised how many barriers you can knock down and how much progress you'll make if you have that absolute determination and conviction that this is what you were put on this earth to do. So stay with it.
This is a really good segue, actually. Conviction, dedication. Where did you first test yourself with those two words? Dedication and commitment.
I think maybe I've had two careers in my life, really, broadcasting and in the fundraising world. And in broadcasting, I started out when I was very young, and the first job I had that was at a major radio station, I started work on a Saturday night at 8 o'clock. I worked till Sunday morning at 6. And I did the same thing on Sunday night. And I did that for about 5 years. And when you're a young person, that really cuts into your social life in a big, big way. But I thought, no, stay with this. And eventually the hours got better, and I was able to go on and do other things. But yeah, you have to start out with a lot of those levels of work that are not what you envisioned yourself doing. But there's an awful lot of people who sadly are in the, well, no, I'm not doing that. I'm starting higher up. Well, guess what? Maybe you're not. But
everyone starts low.
Yeah,
everyone starts low.
Yeah, and you should accept that. And because that's a platform of opportunity. If you start up high, expectation of you is also very high. But if you start out low, you can turn to people and they'll guide you and they'll teach you stuff and they'll help you move from that platform to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. So it's actually a good thing. But so that's what I did. That was a challenge for me, to go back to the original question, to stay with that when everybody else was out, partying and having fun and so on. I was at work. And then I think the second challenge in my life really was when Jesse was diagnosed with a life-threatening illness. And I knew I had to do something, yes. Yes, Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And we have no survivors yet. So that was a horrendous challenge, and your world literally flips upside down when that news arrives in your household, as it does for way too many people.
And when you guys got that news, how did you feel?
Well, the shock wave is the first thing that goes through you and goes through your whole family, particularly with your, in our case, it could be your partner, but in our case, it's me, my wife and I. That's a real bolt of lightning that hits you when you realize what the future holds and the difficulty that you're going to face. And then you go through those periods of, well, why us? What did we do wrong? And then you blame yourself. Did we do something wrong to cause this to happen? And then you feel a little sorry for yourself at times. You feel a little angry. You go through a whole pile of feelings. And eventually you get to the point where you say, you know what? None of this is helping. It is what it is, and now we're going to have to get busy and see if we can do something about it. And when we made the decision to become involved in fundraising and funding research to try and find that cure that I know is out there, we did that knowing that we were in this for the long run and for everybody, not just for Jesse. So it was for all those boys. And when you say all those boys, to the viewers and listeners, it might sound like, oh yeah, there's a boy here, a boy there. You have no idea of the magnitude that grips you when, in the time that we're talking, some other family today is going to learn the dreadful news that their son has Duchenne muscular dystrophy. I don't know who they are. I don't know where they are. But my goal in life is to make sure that we're in time for that family.
For those that don't know what Duchenne muscular dystrophy is.
Yeah, it's a wasting of muscles, and it affects, I always say, boys almost exclusively. It's like 99.99999% of the time, it's boys. And it has to do with the XY chromosomes, and I don't want to get too technical because A, I can't get too technical because I don't know all that knowledge, and B, it's not probably all that super helpful. The knowledge is available from those who are much smarter than I am, but that's what results in it being boys. And it's not evident at birth, It'll begin to manifest itself around 4 or 5, perhaps. It can be diagnosed now at birth if there's some other difficulty and they're looking, and they may also stumble across this. But generally in the past, young boys would be 4 or 5 before teachers would notice they had difficulty getting up from the floor and so on. And then the diagnosis comes pretty quickly and pretty painfully, and you realize that, okay, things have changed. The muscles grow weaker, and boys have generally needed a wheelchair somewhere in the age range of 11 to 12, perhaps, or some assistance, not being able to walk long distances and needing a wheelchair at that time. And then they progress to where they're making use of a wheelchair all the time. And as I say, it eventually affects the respiratory system and the heart, and it doesn't have a happy outcome.
And at what point did, so Jesse was diagnosed at what age?
He was 5.
He was 5 years old when he was diagnosed. And that's when your world changed at that point?
Exactly, yeah.
And when you took that news, at that point, what were you doing?
I was still working in television at the time, and you kind of keep that to yourself for quite a while. We actually are a very private family, and I knew I wanted to do something, and it would probably have been reasonably understandable and easier for me to do that because I was familiar with microphones and cameras and so on, and I knew we were going to have to become in the public. But it also meant I was going to have to drag my entire family across that line for a period of time while we were doing what we were doing. And I could live with that, but I had to make sure in my mind that they were going to be okay with that. So I was working in television, and you keep that to yourself for quite a while, and eventually, here's what happens. Your best friends know something's not right here.
Because you're not acting the same.
Yeah, you're not acting the same. And you don't know how to tell your best friends, but everybody knows something's not right here. And eventually you do. You find that friend that everybody has, someone they can turn to and who they trust. And I shared that with a good friend, and he in turn put the news out to other people. And then they're on your side. They want to help. Particularly children. Children are just amazing. They don't have an agenda. They just say, "Oh, you got a problem? Okay, let's help." And that's exactly what they do. So that was where we began to foster this idea of fundraising. And I knew very little about doing that, but I knew that research, which was never a strength of mine in school, was where the answer was going to come from. And I just asked myself the question, how does my buying another wheelchair help solve this problem? The answer was it doesn't. So we decided to focus our energies in research. And at that time, there was very little going on in research.
Right.
Partly because there was very little funding for research. So we decided to focus on the financial side of that, and other people were doing a great job in modifying homes to make them wheelchair accessible and helping people get a van that also was wheelchair accessible, and making all those modifications that you have to make in life. But we decided to take the road less chosen, that we were going to focus strictly on research. And it's a wee bit like throwing Jell-O at the wall. It's hard to get it to stick, but when you get a little bit to stick, there's something to cling to there. So I thought, well, how are we going to do this?
Right.
And it was a case of, yes, we could hold car washes and bake sales, but we were going to have to do that until hell froze over before we would raise enough money. And I knew that Canadians, because of Terry Fox, were familiar with the concept of people going out and challenging themselves and challenging the geography of the country and so on. And I thought, well, I think we should try and put a walk together. So I asked around in the newsroom, I said, does anybody know anything about Terry Fox? And my friend Bob Smith, who is one of the most gifted writers I've ever met, said, Well, I don't, but I know a guy who does. And I said, who's that? And he said, Ron Calhoun. Well, Ron lives here in London, Ontario.
Oh, okay.
And I did not want to be a Terry Fox wannabe. I had the utmost respect for what Terry did, and I think most Canadians do. It's just an absolutely staggering story.
Yes.
One of the proudest times in Canadian history, I think. So, but I thought at least people understand that. So Jesse and I came up with this idea that I would push him across Ontario in his wheelchair, which we did in 1995, and that was 3,300 kilometers. And we managed to raise $1.5 million for research. And then we had two problems. Number one, there wasn't an awful lot of places to put the money because there was so little research. So we worked on cultivating people to be in that field.
Yeah.
And then secondly, I felt like Homer Simpson. It was like, no, because we gave out the $1.5 million and the cupboard was bare. And I thought, well, that wasn't very smart. I thought, what we need to do is build an endowment. And a lot of people laughed at me. They said, you'll never get that off the ground. So I thought, well, one way to get it off the ground is to try and do something perhaps bigger that would not involve Jesse. And there was a reason for that, because I decided to walk across Canada, which I wasn't running, I understand that, but then again, I was 52 at the time. So I think people understood what I was trying to accomplish there. And I thought we better get going on that fairly soon, because I'm getting older, and we wanted to start an endowment, which we have done. And so we made this journey across the country, and it was a life-changing experience for me. And we have now been able to give out over 11 million to research.
Wow.
And we have built our endowment to where it's getting to close to 15 million.
Wow.
And that's the machine that's going to drive research in the future.
That's right.
So we're pretty pleased with what we've been able to accomplish, and we're not resting on our laurels. We've got more to do yet, because we, as I said at the outset, my goal is to see us put 5 million a year into research, which would, I think, bring us pretty close to funding just about every project on the planet in that disease. And when you focus that much energy on something, you usually get a fairly good result. So,
right. And you give those funding out to multiple different labs? Is that what
we
you
do.
Okay.
We do. We call for proposals in the spring, and we receive those, and we have a group called the Research Funding Advisory Committee, and I have nothing to do with that committee. They do that on their own, and it's internally and externally peer reviewed, and those projects and proposals are scaled and rated, and then that goes to the board, and the board decides, once they've been approved, we know these are solid proposals, they allot the monies that are going there. And so we try to do as many as we can to help speed up the hunt for a cure. And we actually do that funding in the fall of the same year.
Oh, wow.
And when I looked at it at the outset and looked to see what was being done in funding, A, it was a small amount that was going to funding, and B, ranking those proposals and getting them peer reviewed was sometimes taking a year and a half. Those days are gone. Collaboration and cooperating with others is where it's at to make things happen.
Okay.
And the more we do that, the better our chances of success.
So which countries are you coordinating with?
We have projects we fund in Canada, in the United States, in Australia, in Italy, and in the UK. So,
wow.
As I say, we're looking at what you would probably call a rare disease, but so it's not. We're not what I would sort of say is like the big three. We're not cancer. We're not heart and stroke. We're not diabetes. They have great researchers working globally in those areas. We have researchers working in a number of countries, perhaps not globally yet, but in a number of countries, and they are doing exactly what we want people to do, and that is to share that information. In the early days, I used to think to myself, I hope there isn't just a single researcher thinking, yeah, I'm going to come up with a cure for this, and they're going to give me a a great medal and a prize and so on. And I always felt, don't try to win a prize for you. Don't seek honor and glory at the expense of children. Share that knowledge with somebody else, and it's okay if 50 people get up on the stage and take a bow when they find that.
Right.
And the same thing with donors. When donors make a contribution, I always have the feeling that when we get there, every one of them is going to be able to say, you see that thing over there that started in London, Ontario? I helped build that. And they are the people who have helped create the endowment that's going to generate dollars for research in the future. And they should be very proud of what they've done there.
So what?
I, by the way, am just a volunteer there.
You're a volunteer at
Jesse's Journey.
At Jesse's Journey. But you have you've authored 2 books.
Yes, the first one I wrote was called Jesse's Journey, A Canadian Story.
Okay.
And it was about our travels together both across Ontario and then the journey across Canada. The second book, the one you have here today, is strictly about the journey across Canada. It's a little more geared toward nurturing and encouraging people to go and do that thing they want to do. I could hear Jesse telling me, when I think, what am I going to do now? And I know he'd say, Dad, take all those people who have something they want to do and they've never done it. And I don't know what it is. They might want to paint, write a book, ride their bicycle across the country, take up yoga, become a dentist. I have no idea what they want to do, but I want to encourage those people to go and try, because they keep saying, well, I'm going to wait until, and yeah, when the sun's shining and the temperature's just right, and they've got a million excuses,
That's
you
right.
know?
That's right.
When we started out going across Ontario, it was a Saturday morning, the snow was blowing sideways, and we thought, Duchenne didn't wait for a perfect day to strike. We're not waiting for a perfect day to strike back. So we just went out, go and try your best. And you're going to make mistakes. People don't want to admit that they're going to be part of something that's going to involve a bit of pain and some failure at the start. But we all did that at the beginning.
Of course. I often say that to reach the island of success, you have to swim through the ocean of failure.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's expected.
The reference I often make is when I'm out speaking to people is nobody steals second base when they've still got a foot on first.
There you go.
Eventually, you've got to let go and go and try it.
I like that.
And you'd be surprised how many times you get there and you say, hey, that wasn't bad. Wasn't perfect, but maybe I could try some more. And I wanted to let people know that even if you fail, you've had a good shot at it.
Right.
Just don't get to that rocking chair at the end and say, gee, if only I had, gosh, I wish I had of. Go and do stuff.
Right.
What's the worst thing can happen?
Right.
You fail.
That's right. Then you move on.
Yeah.
Move on. There's an excerpt or 2 of them from the book here that I thought was very, very touching. I mean, there's a lot of things here that is very touching, but one in particular, when you talk about your blisters on your feet, and you said here, our floor was empty except for us. I decided to work on the blisters on my feet, which were in pretty bad shape after a day of pounding the pavement in the rain. And then you described the blister popping party.
You would pick something totally not pretty.
So, right, being a dentist, right?
Yeah.
But I thought that was really interesting because, this is not just about feet and blisters on your feet. This is, to me, it's more of a metaphor of encountering difficulties and having to stick with your original goal from what you decided to do from the outset and continuing on despite all the quote-unquote blisters on your feet. What kept you going?
Well, sometimes I compared it to being at war, which may sound very crazy, and it is. But here's the way I looked at it. The good thing for us is A, nobody was shooting at us, and B, we knew what day the war was ending on. I knew if I stayed out there for what I thought would be 275 days, turned out to be 286 days from Newfoundland to Victoria, British Columbia. And I thought, at the end of each day, I thought, okay, that's one more day you don't have to do again. Let's do the next one then. And then let's do the next one. And that's the way to actually do things. It's the same as teaching kids how to save money. You put a bit in, a bit more, and a bit more, and a bit more, and it starts to earn interest, and things get bigger, and they get better. So a lot of people, when they start out right here, they're looking at the end of this project. Don't look at the end. Look at the day, and then work on tomorrow, and work on the next day. It's very simple. It's plan your work and work your plan.
What kept you from giving up?
Well, I thought, it crossed my mind one day in Saskatchewan, the only time in the entire journey that I had called home the night before, and Shereen was being cheerful and as confident as she could, but she said, Jesse's not well. And she said, don't worry, honey, he'll be okay. But I could hear the concern. When I stepped out onto the highway that next morning, the snow was blowing sideways, and I thought, should I go home? And I think I can answer your question by saying, I could hear what Jesse would be saying to me. He would have said, Dad, if you quit, that's all you'll be remembered for. And I thought, he's not a quitter, and I don't think he wants his dad to be a quitter, so let's go. One more day. Don't worry about the next month or next few weeks, just one more day. And we knew that there was a day where, unlike those who did go to war, that we could go home. So, and that kind of kept me going a lot of the time.
So you took it one day at a time.
Absolutely, one day at a time.
And each day it was a struggle for you to keep going.
Yeah.
Especially with literally blisters on your feet. And you said at the end of the book, you said you had to change your shoes 6 times.
Yeah. Well, you have to, again, in being realistic in whatever it is you want to take on, you have to prepare for it. So you had to have all those things that were going to help you look after your body, both in internal intake of food and things to look after blisters, the right clothing to wear, make sure that the maps are accurate, make sure that the police or RCMP, OPP, whatever it would be at that time, the escort was going to be there and so on, and the coordination was, it's a massive project. But we just hung in there day after day, and I thought, if we stay with this, whether we make $10 or $10 million, they can never take that away from you.
That's amazing.
That you actually finished what you set out to do. I'm not finished yet. I've still got
I know you
more
haven't.
goals.
A man like you doesn't finish. He always keeps going. That's amazing. Yeah. There's another excerpt, actually, that I want to read out. It's on page 111. And there it is right here. So this is when you're talking about you going and you're saying hi to, or you're trying to say hi to every kid on a wheelchair. Yeah. And I'll just read it. And you said, on the road, I tried to stop and say hello to every person I met who was in a wheelchair. One morning I stopped to greet a little blonde-haired boy smiling as he struggled to catch up with me. The thing that really intrigued me with this is not only are you doing this for, I'm sure you're not doing this for any accolades, but you're doing this from the motivation of your son was afflicted. You're trying to make a difference so that other people don't have to go through what your family is going through, what your son's going through. And you're trying to make a difference. Now, the thing that's really intriguing with that sentence to me is you're not only just one-track minded. You're not just one focused. You don't want to say hi to anybody. You were open to welcoming everybody. So that speaks to me in volumes, because that tells me that it's not just about you or Jesse. It's about the entire community. It's about everyone that's going through this difficulty. That's what this is about. And I really think that the entire success behind Jesse's journey and what you've done so far is because you're not just, I'm just doing this just because of Jesse. I'm doing this, like you said, because I want everyone to see that there's light, even in the times of darkness.
Yeah, it's you do it because it's the right thing to do. And oftentimes we get distracted and we lose our way. We don't stop to ask ourselves often enough, what am I doing with my life? Because we're not here very long. We're just a little fleck in the universe, and from beginning to end, it's gone in a flash. So you really, really want to take the time to adjust your focus every now and then and make sure, am I doing the right thing that I'm supposed to do to make this a successful life, in that you tried to do the right things. So it's a case of making sure that you're dialed into that and stay tuned to that every single day. And don't waste your time with a lot of stuff that doesn't make any sense. In terms of time, I had a gentleman come out and walk with me. His name was Armand Beliveau. I never forgot him. He was 58 years old when we met, and this guy had an interesting background. He fought a couple of guys that Muhammad Ali fought when he was a boxer. He was in the United States Army. He's from New Brunswick, but his family business is they make furniture out of hardwood, which they import from New England to New Brunswick, make the furniture, back to New England to sell this stuff. His kids have dual citizenship, and when I met him, he was becoming a ballroom dancer. Quite a contrast. And he had this interesting theory of the amount of time we have on this earth. And he had the theory of the two clocks. He said there's a clock that starts to tick when you're born. And he said, and it keeps ticking, as we know, all the time. And his view is the human body was designed to last 120 years. And this clock's going the other way. You drink too much, you don't eat the right stuff, you don't exercise, you stay out too late, you don't sleep well, you worry about things, and this clock is going here. He says, when those two meet, you're out of here. And I thought, it's not a bad theory, actually. Theory. And I thought, good for you, Armand. And he came out and walked 33 kilometers with me for the whole day, just like that. He was in great shape.
Wow.
Always took care of himself.
That's amazing.
You know? And I thought, that's an interesting theory. So maybe the human body is designed to last 120 years.
Maybe, yeah. That's interesting. So, so what got you into speaking? I mean, I know you were in broadcasting before. Yes. But now you're labeling yourself as a professional speaker. Yeah. So what got you into that?
Because I had 30 years of broadcast background, and I thought I could harvest the knowledge I had there, and as an opportunity to raise money for research. And I do mostly corporate stuff, and I'm not sure why, but I seem to get called quite often by financial planners and insurance companies who, maybe there are people who've been sitting for 3 or 4 days looking at charts and graphs and going crazy with all the figures. Then they want to bring in somebody that has a real story that happened to real people, that involves real money, that's really been invested, to try and get a real result. And I think they find that kind of refreshing. And so what I do is I don't talk about Duchenne muscular dystrophy.
Okay.
You know, if you went to a conference, Halim, if you sat down and they said, here are the offerings for the conference, you wouldn't check off the box that says, oh, Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Boy, I really want to go and hear all about that. You'd say, that sounds a little depressing. Here's one on team building. Let's go to that one. You wouldn't pick it. So if people wouldn't pick it, why would I want to talk about it? I want to talk about what they want to hear about. So if they want to hear about teamwork, I can use our entire story to talk about teamwork. If they want to talk about dedication, I can do that. If they want to talk about perseverance, I can do that.
Wow.
And it's easy to do. And quite frankly, once the corporate world pays you, the people in the audience, they don't care where that money went. I'll put it in research. Thank you very much. And they have that takeaway that they can go back to the office and say, you know what, we've been building this team the wrong way. What we need is, and maybe they get some sparks that help them in what they're doing. And again, it's a case of if it helps them, then it helps us.
And how long have you been doing this, these speaking engagements for?
Well, I've probably been doing it for about 20 years, but I never got to the point where I had time to turn professional and dedicate my time to it, which is what I'm doing now.
And when did you turn professional? Like when was
2
that?
years ago.
2 years ago.
And I'm probably a little long in the tooth to be turning professional in this. Most speakers I meet are not in their 70s, but that's okay. Sometimes I meet people who have just invented something in their mind and they go out and talk about it and so on. I think in our story, the proof of the pudding is that you're not just hearing somebody who's talking about how to do this, you're hearing from somebody who has gone and done this. And I think it gives you some validation to, and maybe the right to try and share what you have with people in order to help them.
Right.
And when they go on to do something better, then I think that's really good.
Can people message you for speaking engagements?
They can. If they go to the website, I'm pretty easy to find. If they go to the website, which is very simple, it's ordinarydad.ca.
Ordinarydad.ca.
Yeah.
And that'll be, for those that are watching this on YouTube, that'll be in the description box right below in the link. And you have another website too, right?
Yes, there's a Jesse's Journey website.
Okay.
If you want to find out all about research, you want to find out what we do, what events we put together, and all the things we're working on. If you want to find out where all the money went in terms of what researchers, who are they, where are they, what are they working on, we want to be, certainly in Canada, the go-to charity in terms of people being able to join what has rapidly become a family of families, because they're all in this together. And so often, as happened with us, we didn't know anybody with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and it was no history in our family. It was just a genetic fluke. And so often these people, my heart goes out to them, because a lot of them are in small towns and so on. They may be the only family that has someone with Duchenne, and they are feeling so lost and alone. And we want them to know that Jesse's Journey is there. You're not alone. We're there to help you and to do everything we can. So,
and that's through, that's the website, so they can get
Yes.
all the information from there.
Yes.
If they want to donate, they can donate directly.
they could do that at the Jesse's Journey website,
Okay.
if that's their wish.
jessesjourney.com. And if they want to, if anyone wants to reach out to John, then it's ordinarydad.ca. ordinarydad.ca. I'm really grateful to meet you, and grateful to meet other people like you. And you asked me before the podcast aired. You asked me, why am I doing this? And this is one of the consequences behind actually starting this podcast, is because I get to meet amazing people like you, and I'm learning a lot. And for sure, people who are listening to this, people who are watching this, they're also learning heaps from all this. So there's a ton of goodness that's coming out of this. So thank you so much for accepting to come on my podcast and for being an amazing guest on my podcast. You have a very soothing voice, and I'm guessing it's because you've trained yourself to actually be, because you speak professionally and you've been in the broadcast business for a really long time. I love the way your voice sounds. It's very, very soothing. Is there anything else you want to say to the audience before we start?
I think I would just urge people to spend some time being sure you're being who you are and not who everybody else wants you to be, or being what you think everybody else wants you to be. Just be who you are. Do the best you can. You can look in the mirror and answer the question, did you try your hardest? Did you do your best? And if you could say, yes, I did my best. Even if it was unsuccessful, you're a success because you did your best. We're not all gifted to be able to do terrific things, but we're all capable of doing what we can do to our own level and being our best. And, when you come right down to it, we're all pretty ordinary people, really. And so I just see myself as just an ordinary dad who ran into a difficult situation and did the best I could. And I'm going to keep doing the best I can as long as I have time here.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And thank you for everyone that's tuned in. This was an amazing episode with Discover with Sbenati on episode number 12. Tune in on episode number 13. We have a fantastic guest as well. Thank you so much for those that are listening on the podcast, and we will speak to you soon. Take care.